is Dr. Efraim Chalamish. He's a NYU and Kroll Senior Advisor and Institute Fellow. So, one of the most recent policies that we saw in the United States is to adopt ethical supply chain practices, and it's focused on the Uyghur population in China. This is called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Tell us about this act and, of course, the new wave of legislation that we're seeing not only across the United States, but Europe as well.
Absolutely, Natasha, and thank you very much for having me today. So this is becoming a huge issue for international companies. Supply chains were always very important for production. Now, especially after COVID, we pay attention for supply chains. We saw that with the UK Slavery Act in the UK, where people actually paid attention to where slavery is in the world, and now with the US legislation, which actually says that if you import, if you produce, if you mine in that part of China where basically the Muslim ethnic minority is, the presumption is that this is actually forced labor. So companies, especially companies which are involved in global operations, need to pay attention to that. The consequences could be quite dramatic.
Now, how are companies reacting to policies just like this one? Obviously, there are economic costs to implementing any type of policy related to labor and trafficking. Are they truly implementing these policies?
Absolutely. As we saw with bribery and corruption, which became part of cost of doing business, we're seeing now with supply chain and compliance. Companies are developing internal capabilities when it comes to compliance, including supply chain and human rights issues. They're using external experts on that. And even more importantly, they're trying to develop technology internally and externally to know where the relevant data is within the organization, how we can actually monitor the production data, and most importantly, how we can actually report it accurately. I think companies understand that it's not only a compliance game, it's also a reputational game, in the sense that institutional investors and other viewers, like the viewers here today, we do care about how companies actually produce and sell around the world.
The question is then, where does the transparency come in here? How can a consumer, if you're going to buy something, how can you actually know if the company or brand that you're buying from is complying?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Natasha. And in fact, we've seen it with other parts of the compliance world, for example, corruption. It takes time. The first phase is actually the awareness phase. Then we see a couple of major enforcement cases by agencies, whether it's the US, UK, or around the world. And then eventually the public at large is well informed.
Now, how are these policies going to change business as we know it? Because we haven't really touched that much on the cost, right? How is this going to change the supply chain of certain businesses?
Absolutely. It's already changing supply chain management dramatically. I think we're heading towards a more transparency in the supply chain management world. We will know more how supply chains are actually managed. Technology will play a huge role in managing and reporting on supply chain. And I think most importantly, it will involve lots of creativity, innovation, etc. How we can actually get good data in this space in order for consumers to make better decisions and corporations to be able to run much better now.
In your opinion, why do you think that we're seeing such kind of a massive shift in how governments approach this issue than ever before? Is this really being driven by buyers?
This is a terrific question. I think it's a combination of buyers trying to understand better how the ESG movement and sustainability, especially when it comes to governance, for example, how it applies to their daily life, especially when it comes to consumption and buying products. But at the same time, even a bigger trend is governments around the world are really trying to get involved in global politics. So it's not a coincidence that you see CEOs, shareholders, and other companies play a much bigger role in global supply chains, and government themselves are involved as well.
All right. Well, Efraim, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, fascinating, very important to know that, we are seeing government movement towards getting businesses to comply with better and more ethical practices. The question is whether or not we're going to really see that change implemented. And, as a buyer, now you know what you should be looking out for.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hugely important.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. We are